Hey folks, it's Abu. Real quick update for you before you listen to this episode. Leo and I got early screeners of episode 6. We watched well in advance, and we were recording this episode as the news broke that Dune Prophecy had been renewed for season 2. So it's actually kind of funny. The first half of this episode, we had no idea about that news, and we were recording, and then you will hear halfway through this episode us basically scream into our microphones as we see that news pop up on our phones. And then the rest of the conversation, of course, we have the context of season 2 being renewed. So I just wanted to give you that information up front and explain why for a large portion of this episode, you're going to hear us say things like, if it gets renewed for season 2. That's why. Anyway, hope you enjoy this one. Thanks so much for listening.
Today on the show, we've decided to kill all of our competition. And we're going to hide the bodies at the literal scene of the crime. If you think about it, it's the last place anyone would expect to find just a pile of bones.
Think about it.
Think about it. If you think it's dumb, you haven't thought about it enough.
Think more.
Think harder. Think more about how stupid this is.
Keep thinking about it until it makes sense and stops being stupid.
Just keep thinking. Just keep thinking.
Welcome to Gom Jabbar, your guide to the iconic world of Dune. We'll be exploring the themes, philosophies, and characters found in the sandy depths of this vast universe, from Frank Herbert's groundbreaking novels to the adaptations on film and, folks, TV!
Sheesh.
My name's Abu.
My name's Leo.
And we are here.
Yeah.
At the end of it all. Well, at the end of a season of it all.
At the end of some of the all. At the end
some of it all, kind of.
Some
Prophecy,
of it's ended.
episode 6. Woo! The finale to season 1 of Dune Prophecy on HBO Max.
Yeah.
We are here to talk about it today. Not only the episode itself, but of course, at this point, the season at large. But Leo, before we jump right in, let's make Shout Out Mapes proud and take care of our housekeeping.
First up, we have a spoiler warning. We are going to be talking about all 6 episodes of Dune Prophecy. So make sure you've seen the finale, which should have come out just a couple of days ago. And we will also be talking some light details about the Brian Herbert prequel books, as well as the, let's just say through our book club. So make sure you've read the first few books of Frank Herbert, and otherwise you should be good to listen today.
That's right. And of course, a huge shout out up top to our Kwisatz Haderach level patrons, Rob Silver, Daniel Dion, Jonathan Lambert, Brad Hutchins, and C.R. Spruill.
Yeah.
Those are exactly the people I want in my other memory. If you want to possess me, go for it.
Possession, full-blown abomination, Abu. Wow, capital A abomination, huh? Sweet.
I'm here for it. Thank you so much.
Fellas, have fun with his body.
Yes, please do. Thank you so much for your immensely generous contributions and support to making this podcast possible. But of course, our gratitude and our thank yous also extend to all of our patrons who continue to build the foundation upon which this show runs.
Yeah, and listen, hey, if you are burnt out on subscription things and you want to make a one-time donation, one-time tip, you can buy us a spice coffee. You can buy us tickets off of this fucking planet, even though the spaceport's in lockdown. Let's get the fuck out of here. That link is in the show notes.
Yes.
We appreciate that as well.
That's right. Okay, you know the game plan for these Dune Prophecy episodes, folks. We will begin the conversation by summarizing today's episode, which is episode 6 of Dune Prophecy. Then we will dive into a couple of takeaways. And of course, we will wrap up today's conversation by wrapping up our coverage of Dune Prophecy and sharing our final big picture thoughts on the show at large. So before we dive into all of that, let's take a quick breather and compose ourselves. This is going to be a big one, folks. So we'll see you in just a minute after this short break.
Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're ready to talk about the final episode of Dune Prophecy. Our finale of Dune Prophecy opens with a flashback to young Valia, Tula, Kasha, and Francesca during the death of Dorothea. Oh my God. Now,
Yeah.
they were just fully watching when Valia had Dorothea kill herself, and they conspire to keep it a secret, claiming suicide with careful telling of truth. She took her life by her own hand. Don't ask any follow-up questions.
That's right.
And Tula reveals to her sister that she is pregnant by Ori Atreides.
Ooh, wow.
And Valia promises to support Tula and her baby once she is Mother Superior. Now that she is Mother Superior, she says, hey, I can fucking rewrite the rules, sis. I'm here for you. And rules about separating children and their mothers, all of those rules be damned.
So after the opening credit scene, we then return to present day. We are once again with Tula and Sook Dr. Nazir, who's a hottie McHottie, my goodness.
Oh, she's so
as
beautiful.
She's so beautiful. As the two are trying to, once again, solve the mystery of this machine virus. Now we have more information about it, thanks to Lila/Raquel from last episode. Is this something that we can neutralize? They ultimately conclude that we could maybe neutralize this. If we did the same thing we do in the agony, where a sister undergoes the agony, takes this Rozok poison, and then changes the poison within her own body, that same technique might also work on this virus. And Tula volunteers first, but Nazir says, no, I'm the doctor. Let me handle this one. And that's what she does. We then cut to this pretty great scene, actually, where we get this lovely visualization of the virus, these little floating dust particles, where Dr. Nazir attempts to do just that, to undergo an agony via this virus and transmute some sort of antidote that they could then use. Unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Right.
And Dr. Nazir burns, just like Kasha, just like Pruitt. And in her final moments, with her final breaths, Nazir reveals that the visions that she is seeing, the same visions that we've been teasing all season long, are not human. Those eyes are not human.
Bum, bum, bum. Well, over at the palace, everyone's favorite place for intrigue, Desmond is torturing Kieran by just bouncing him against the wall.
It's kind of, can you do that to me? That looks kind of fun.
It looks fun. Kieran's coughing up blood. So now I'm wondering, like, maybe something that the suspensors, maybe they magnify the hit where he like hits the ground. But I'm like, yeah, is this the just wall ball? Wall ball with the traitorous swordmaster? Sure.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure the goons to his left and right have also been like punching him and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, maybe not. They're just like, love wall ball, boss. This is our favorite. They're getting a nice cardio workout. They're starting to sweat a little. It's great. Better than pickleball, you know. Now, Desmond is trying to kind of suss out, okay, we have this traitor. He was part of this rebellion plot. He knows that the Sisterhood is involved, and he wants Kieran to give up the facts. He wants Kieran to confess. He wants Kieran to provide him that smoking gun. Kieran refuses. First of all, he's like, I had no fucking clue. I'm an idiot. Didn't you know this? I'm dumb. I don't know any of this stuff. But also, I hate you, Desmond. I'm not going to, even if I did fucking know, I hate you, and I hate everything the Emperor stands for, he says. I'm impressed because he knows what the Emperor stands for, and I'm still kind of wondering. Emperor seems mostly pretty reactive and generally pretty stable and stagnant. Not really sure what that means, but sure.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, he refuses, and he's thrown against the wall again. Bounce him again, boys. Give him another bounce. Now, in a quick throwaway scene, Yanez demonstrates that despite her advanced truth-telling abilities and her incredible training with the Bene Gesserit, she sucks at intrigue because she is immediately caught trying to rescue Kieran, and she's caught by none other than her mother, Empress Natalia.
Yeah, wow. This irked me a lot because this was inexplicable on so many levels. Why Natalia would do this? We've had basically no interaction between mother and daughter except that scene where she is dressing for the wedding in episode 1.
Yeah.
In which we are shown that the two seemingly have a loving and supportive relationship. And in fact, Natalia urges her daughter to embrace her own autonomy and make her own choices and not do what she feels she has to within the confines of a royal life. And for that same mother to now show up 5 episodes later and arrest her daughter for some reason is just so inexplicable and feels so ham-fisted and lazy to me, and just like, we need this plot to happen, so it happened. This irked me quite a bit. I got hung up on this.
Yeah, we got a couple of hints at this kind of rift that was forming in the like breakfast table where Inez goes, I want to leave with Mother Valia, and her mother is the one that shuts her down and goes, that's not possible at this point. So we start to see that rift form a little bit, but you're right. I think like many other instances, in hindsight, they would have benefited from one additional scene where they kind of hash it out and they go, I don't think we're seeing eye to eye anymore. And I'm starting not to trust that you know what's happening or you know what's best. But we don't have that. So this does feel pretty sudden. And even the emotion of her mother going, I wish you'd come to me sooner.
Right.
I'm sort of like, do you? Would that have changed anything?
What does that mean?
Well, y'all might be wondering what Havoco's up to.
What is he up to? Tell
fully me. In bed with Francesca. And I actually really liked this little scene. I thought there was a lot of tenderness between them. Both Taboo and Mark Strong looking fucking great. I cannot believe that Mark Strong is 61 years old. This dude is looking...
That's crazy.
Oh, he's looking Mark Strong, if you know what I mean.
Hello.
That's a name joke. Anyway, nevertheless, she is in bed with him. He says, she's like, hey, I've got to go. I've got to leave. He goes, no, please stay with me forever. And in fact, Natalia knows about us. She's none too happy about it, but I think it would be a relief for everyone for us to just drop the charade. Let's stop fucking pretending. You're the love of my life. Let's do this. And Francesca has a moment of like, wow, you're serious about this? Like, you would have me in Natalia's place and Natalia will go off and do other things. And he says, I will talk to, bring Valia. Like, I want to talk to Mother Superior. Well, I want to get this done. And the real impression I was getting here, and we get kind of confirmation of this later, is he is just fully offering Francesca kind of what the whole point has been this whole time. A member of the Sisterhood on the Emperor's throne, right? At the head of the universe. Granted, with her husband, but someone who she knows that she can control fully. He's in love with her. And I don't know.
I would question that a little, because he did not offer her marriage and an empire. He said, I will find a place for you in the palace so that you can continue to stay here as my mistress. I don't think it's let's do a little switcheroo, swapperoo with you and Natalia and make you the empress. It's, I don't want you to leave, babe. And I'll go send her off on some mission so that you and me can just keep banging openly. And I'll just find you some sort of paper pushing job here in the palace.
That's true. He says he's tired of being patient. He says he's going to, he offers her a place. I'll find you a place to stay in the palace. But I also got the impression that his idea of what that looked like changed throughout the scene, where at first he's going, stay, don't leave. And then he's going, you know what? No, fuck it. Let's drop the pretense. Natalia knows. And ultimately, whatever he didn't say, I get a lot more of it in what then Francesca says to Natalia when they meet later. And she's going, this is what he was saying to me, and this is what we're talking about. So that's kind of what that's where I'm kind of settling. But
right. But I think even politically, like, she would nominally be like Empress adjacent. Like,
sure.
To Valia's point later, a divorce would destabilize the empire. And so, like, I imagine it's more of a, like, I send Natalia away and you just kind of are my, like, mistress / acting empress, but, like, you maybe don't have the title and prestige that comes with it, like I don't think Havoko is so stupid and enamored that he would blow up the Imperium to divorce his political wife and be with his mistress and then elevate his mistress, which would also blow back on him.
Have you seen Francesca? I mean,
absolutely. I would do all of those things for Francesca. Absolutely. But I think Francesca is also making some leaps of assumption here about what Havoko is promising. I think the specific words that were spoken in that scene did not promise a divorce and marriage.
I think, yeah, it's maybe not so clear, but it's also possible that what Francesca's talking about in this moment, or when she talks to Valia later, is as much about the fact that he is ready to make some big changes. He is still fully in her pocket.
Yes.
So maybe it's not today that he's like, you get the title of Empress, but if even it's, I'm going to send Natalia away to far away in the galaxy, and then it'll be you and me in the palace. She's like, honestly, would not be that hard to get from like where we are now to this later thing.
Right. Absolutely. Francesca wields an immense amount of influence on the Emperor, regardless of her position or what title she may or may not be given. She's imprinted on this guy quite heavily.
Yeah.
And it is quite easy for her to make him do practically whatever she wants him to do. And that's huge. You know, that is about as close to the throne as you can get without actually sitting on the throne.
Right.
Okay, well, speaking of Valia, it's time to plan a prison break, Leo.
Uh-huh.
Because, again, despite sort of Francesca being like, I'm in a position of ultimate power here, let's utilize this. Like, we got a huge opening, let's jump right in. Valia's like, no, fuck your plan. This is my plan.
I've got a
This
new
is my
plan.
dumb plan that I'm going to dumbly explain to you.
Uh-huh.
Here's the plan. Let me try to explain this.
Well, she
folks.
has to. There's a camera watching her. They need to make sure they lay out every step of it for later.
Right. Exactly. Step 1. Valia will boldly go to the palace and get herself captured in order to enter the Suspensor prison to get Yanez out.
Yeah.
Theodosia, remember her. She will shapeshift into Yanez.
Yeah.
Francesca is going to kill Javico Carino.
Yeah.
Which is batshit. What? That's batshit crazy to me, Valia Harkonnen, after you just explained to her that a
We can't
divorce would
destabilize.
destabilize the Imperium.
Yeah.
So killing him is not going to destabilize the Imperium?
Yeah.
Is it not going to leave a massive power vacuum where there's going to be this like political blitzkrieg of every fucking powerful house on the Landsraad gunning for the throne? Because he doesn't have a legitimate heir. Constantine is off in Arrakis doing shit.
Yeah.
And Yanez was going to be married off, but has now disappeared because you've, saved her and took her to Wallach
You
Nine.
abducted her. Yeah.
You abducted her. What is the plan after that? Like, anyway, it's that is Valia's plan that she explains here to Francesca and Theodosia. This is how we're getting Yanez out. We're going to kill the Emperor, and then we're going to get things back on track. We're going to get Yanez on that throne. All of
Yeah.
it seems very unlikely.
Like, because she also doesn't account for Natalia at all. Like,
Yeah,
her whole plan,
Exactly.
let's kill him. It's like,
The more you think about it, you're like, Francesca, babe, you're in. You're already
Yeah.
your foot is already halfway through this door.
you're there.
Let's just walk the rest of the way in, and we don't need to kill anyone or go through some shenanigans to abduct the princess. Like, the solution was literally handed to Valia right there in that moment, and she refused it.
Yeah. Multiple times. And that'll be one of my takeaways today. It's just like,
Yeah, a lot more to say about that.
yeah, we see how much Valia, like what she says and what she does are very unaligned.
Right.
Now, her fully half-baked plan aside, not even in the oven yet, plan aside, we cut to another flashback where the young conspirators consult with Anarul. So it's all four friends in the thinking machine asking some questions and devising their 30-year plan to get Yanez on the throne.
Yeah.
And I thought parts of this were really cool. I liked the idea of we have this young Carino whose big tendencies are he's like kind of fearful, and he's more likely to be a stable person than like a dynamic action taking person. And
Yeah.
Natalia, her qualities are that she is very action driven and very aggressive, and like those come together into Yanez, who's then going to be a really excellent empress. And I'm like, yeah, that is very in line with what we know about the breeding program come the time of Paul Atreides, where they're saying
exactly.
qualities of House Atreides, qualities of House Harkonnen, blah, blah, blah. So all of that I thought was quite cool.
Yeah, it was. And I wanted to quickly shout out Crusader Kings 3 for folks who have played it, because this is just these young girls playing Crusader Kings 3. That's a game where you rule an empire through many generations of kings and queens. and like 80% of the game is you marrying off your children and your children's children to the proper pairings politically, but
Uh-huh.
mostly genetically, weirdly. Like all the characters have certain traits,
Yeah.
and you have to combine the traits to create the best ruler for your empire that has all the best positive traits.
So what you're saying is Crusader Kings needs a Dune DLC.
Crusader Kings is already like 90% of the way to just being a Bene Gesserit
Bene
simulator.
Gesserit game. Yeah.
And it just needs that final 10% push. But it certainly this scene made me think of Crusader Kings 3. So I wanted to mention it real quick.
Yeah, great point. Well, Anarul shows Tula, at a point, Valia says, "Hey, girls, give me and Tula a second alone." And they all go, "Of course." And then they walk into the shadows and are gone. Anarul has calculated that the cross of an Atreides and a Harkonnen, which has never happened before, would be very formidable. Like just incredible qualities across the board. Maybe this is charismaticness. Maybe this is boldness. Who knows? But just very formidable. If guided, could be someone that would shift the whole universe. Very Kwisatz Haderach, right?
Yeah. This is where I have some follow-up questions for Annual. How?
Yeah.
Why? In what way?
Yeah. Say a little more
specific?
Yeah. And she goes,
ChatGPT?
"Here's what I found can you say a little more on the internet?" And you're like, "Thanks."
This was frustrating to me because this is giving Skywalker, right? This is giving Chosen One. This is giving Harkonnen and Atreides. Bloodlines are always special, magical, different, unique, destined.
Yeah.
Which I think we've chatted about this before on a previous book club, but doing that, forcing everything to be related to this same family or whatever, shrinks a universe. It takes the mysticism, magic, and excitement and wonder out of a universe when you constantly just tie it back to the same thing. Atreides plus Harkonnen gives you some sort of magical Kwisatz Haderach baby every time.
Yeah. Well, that begs the question. So you couldn't do anything for 10,000 years, despite the fact that you have these two perfect bloodlines that'll create a hyper powerful person, no matter what.
Right.
Very confused. And I think ultimately not the best.
Agreed.
Yeah, very, very Skywalker coded. That's true.
Let's check in with Lila, because things are going on over here too, folks.
Yeah.
Lila, who is now possessed by Dorothea, tricks Jen into releasing her from her
Jen.
Releasing her from her restraints, and then immediately starts wandering around the school until she happens to come upon and crash Emmeline's secret meeting of these religious acolytes that we've seen these past couple episodes.
Yeah.
From there, she asks some weird questions that makes Emmeline's ears perk up. She, in particular, asks about sisters who are ancient history by this point. Like, they left like 30 plus years ago. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
None of them work here anymore still? Do they even go here? So then Dorothea frantically tries to search for information about what happened to her friends and her followers from 30 years ago. These Butlerian sisters who followed her belief that we saw back in episode 1. Only to learn that they've been erased. They were disbanded, they were erased, they were removed. They are no longer part of the Sisterhood.
Yeah, they're not off on a mission somewhere. They're not like Francesca, right? Other side of the universe doing something. They're just gone. Which does make me wonder, where did Emmeline read about these people then?
Yes.
If they're erased from the records.
Exactly.
I'm curious. I might need to rewatch a couple of those scenes, but I left, having seen the episode now twice, I'm still not exactly sure if these sisters, the spooky, scary skeletons we're going to see later, if they were erased from the records, how did Emmeline read about them?
Right. It's totally illogical. Because also Dorothea goes into what I guess is the Mother Superior's office and like goes into the secret locker, beep, 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 beep.
Yeah, knows the code.
Pulls out like hidden records. Emmeline wouldn't have access to any of that. So how would she know that that's a great question.
So the hidden records were expunged of these people you murdered, but you just left references to them in all of these other places? Feels like maybe an issue.
Certainly an issue. Well, sticking with, this happens a little later in the episode, but I figure let's sort of stick with Wallach 9 for a second. Dorothea does then lead Emmeline and Jen at this point, who has frantically arrived and is trying to get Lila back to the secret room.
Yeah.
She leads them to that pool courtyard where we've seen a lot of conversations happen on Wallach 9, and specifically to the spot where she died, where she
Yeah.
stabbed herself in episode 1 because of Valia's actions. And we get this pretty horrific flashback to the young conspirators, the 4 girls from earlier, confronting first, and then using the voice murdering the Butlerian sisters.
Yeah.
All except Avila, young Avila, who we see kind of fall to her knees and say, I changed my mind. I will accept your leadership, Valia.
This also felt a little fast because
Yes.
the command, it was like the command they said is if you cannot bow, if you can't like understand my vision and join me and follow my lead, then you should do what Dorothea did, which is to say, take your own life with a knife. And now you have to choose. And that was the command. And everyone, cuts their own throats, except for Avila. But I'm like, you didn't want to give him like a 5-minute pitch. You didn't want to do like an elevator pitch style of like, hey, I know we're all torn up. They kind of just say a couple of quick things. And then they're like, all right. Like very uninterested in those resources that are being wasted. Right. And I think this is one of those differences in the books where in the book, Valia is very like, we might have to retrain and reprogram Dorothea's followers, but the goal is not to just murder them outright. And in here, we see you murdering like a giant chunk, or at least like a big chunk of who we've seen of the Sisterhood.
It doesn't land because it's very transparently shock for shock value, like this scene is.
Yeah.
And so like it doesn't quite land like I think they think it does. Like I imagine the show wants us to go, oh my God, what a twist. That's crazy that they chose to do that. But instead, my reaction is mostly confusion rather than shock.
Yeah.
And that I did walk away from the scene with sort of a hollow feeling of mostly confusion and wondering why I just watched that happen.
I liked Tula's line where she's like, please listen to her. Like she's still very shell-shocked from like mass violence and her part of it and trying to like turn a new leaf. And I liked that she had that agency in this moment. But again, she didn't really work that hard to be like, whoa, before we do that. So for sure, I think I'm not sure exactly, what I was supposed to feel from this. It was a little like, okay, also why in the Cone of Silence? Like they deployed the Cone of Silence, which I was excited about. This was a moment where I was like, I like that I got to see a Cone of Silence being deployed, but I don't know its function. I don't know why it was being used. You could say, well, there might have been someone overhearing and they're just kind of cementing the secret, but you haven't shown me any other people. So I don't know.
Right. And it's the dead of night. Like there's all these reasons for us to not
worry about it being overheard.
Right. Lots of confusion and questions for sure.
So anyway,
Either way, here's something else that's incredibly confusing. We cut back to present day.
Yeah.
Somehow Dorothea's other memory within Lila knows this happened.
Yeah.
Knows about the slaughter because she walks over and pushes a secret button compartment thing, and that drains the water from the pool to reveal that the Butlerian sisters that the conspirators murdered 30 years ago, their bodies are just right there at the bottom of the pool.
This is honestly probably one of the worst parts of this episode.
Like baffling.
I was thinking just now, like, what if Dorothea's mother? What if Lila's mother? We still don't know who Lila's mother is. What if Lila's mother was among those people? And if she was, then at least her mother's memories again, in Frank's world, up to the point of conception, so not even, but whatever. Let's say Lila's mother was part of that group, and thus she has her mother's memories. And so now Dorothea, in charge of Lila's bodies, has Lila's memories and also Lila's mother's memories and also Raquel's memories, blah, blah, blah. Let's just fucking say it works that way.
Yeah.
We didn't get any sign of that. So again, we're doing the work of the writers to say, well, here's maybe a way that it works.
Right.
But
also it doesn't work because why would she be confused about what happened to them then if she just remembers what happened?
Oh, fucking good point.
Why go to the office and look for records? You remembered what happened. You remembered this slaughter happened. So why the fuck are you looking for records in an office?
Yeah. That's also a great point that she either knows about the skeletons at the bottom of the pool or she doesn't know where all of her friends are. And in this episode, she does both.
Both of those things. It's so utterly confusing and confounding. And like, maybe there's an explanation that's both of us are missing somehow.
Yeah, we need
But I have watched and rewatched this episode multiple times. And it has never made sense on any watch of this episode.
Yeah.
Wrapping up sort of this summary of the Wallach 9 adventures, the final thing that Lila/Dorothea does is after showing this group the bones at the bottom of this pool, she leads this angry group of sisters into the breeding index room, once again just kind of breaking into it. The security here is not good at the Sisterhood School.
Just a crowbar does it all.
Just a crowbar. And they make their way to Anarul, they make their way to the breeding index, and Dorothea smashes the computer.
Bonk. Yep. Well, anyway, back at the palace, Havoko confronts Desmond. What the fuck, dude? You arrest my daughter.
Bro, I thought we were... Bro.
Bro. Come on, bro. That's so
you brought
not
my daughter
gnarly
into
of you.
This? Bro.
That is so not lit, fam. And Desmond, hilariously, is like, this is really between you and Natalia. Like, honestly, she commanded me to. And ultimately, even though Desmond very much, again, pushes for his plans, his desire to rid the empire of the Sisterhood, Havoko is clearly backsliding. Havoko is clearly like, listen, actually, I'm going to patch some stuff up. I might have been hasty before when I kicked out the Truth Sayers. I'm going to bring them back. And I'm going to meet with the Mother Superior and I'm going to talk to her, talk it out, because we've had a long relationship. And the fact that I threw all of that away, it was brash of me, which I really appreciated because, again,
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I really loved this moment for a few reasons. Like, first, it is Havoko pushing back, but it's also Havoko pushing back in a direction of stability and in a direction of the status quo of, I kind of liked how things were before. Yes. And I kind of want to go back to how things were before, which feels very in line with this character who's driven by fear and has these, anxieties. This fucking guy, absolutely. Desmond's out here killing a lot of people. And that's taking bold movements. And I feel like I'm losing control. I don't like this anymore. I want back to safety.
It's a great moment. It's very in line with his character and it gives him agency. He does something for his own plot line, which I loved and is still consistent with what we've established him to be in this story.
Right.
The beacon of stagnation, the beacon of complacency, the beacon of the status quo, as you stated.
Not to mention, we also know this is because of his time with Francesca. This is because of the things she's telling him. So it's a moment of agency. It's a moment of him pushing back against this charismatic guy, Desmond Hart, but he is still acting at the wishes of the Bene Gesserit. He's again, trading his puppet strings back and forth. And ultimately that will also color very much his realization that he's never really made a choice in his life, which is such a crippling, sad moment and will justify his choice
Mark
later.
Strong crushed it during that moment, for sure.
He's so good. He's so good. I loved him. Now, Valia's plan is fully set in motion as she and Theodosia arrive at the palace, just as Natalia and Desmond make their move against Havoko. He's upset about this and then is told by a guard, hey, boss, Mother Superior's here. And he's like, oh shit, well, actually kind of good. Thank God. And he, desperate, distraught, approaches Valia. And I would say this is the second time that Valia is handed what she claims to want on a silver platter. He goes, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I was led astray by that guy. Help me defeat him.
Right.
And we'll go back to how it was. I'll have a truth sayer. Me, the Sisterhood and the Emperor, tight, close again. And she's like, no, fuck you. And in fact,
sitting on his throne, by the way,
sitting on his
while
throne,
delivering this monologue.
She starts the interaction by saying, I wanted to clarify our positions. Fucking insane.
The audacity.
The audacity. And then she launches into her villain monologue. Quote, we've been shaping your path since before you were born. You were only ever an assignment. You didn't really think Francesca loved you.
Oh,
did you?
God.
End quote. And first of all, bullshit. You were not shaping his path since before he was born. He was already born, I think, 30 years ago. Liar. Second of all, was so mean. I left this scene feeling so genuinely bad for Havoko Carino.
Yeah.
So he says, arrest her, and she goes without complaint.
This scene really landed. I mean, it also shows us Valia's character, her vindictiveness.
Totally.
She's not out here trying to complete a goal in the most reasonable way possible. She's out here for revenge. She's out here to stick it to the guy that stuck it to her. Let this be a lesson to you, Havoko Carino. Don't you ever fuck with Mother Superior ever again.
Yeah.
This is personal for her. She is well beyond thinking logically. And I think this scene really hits that home for us. This is personal. She would not have dug so deep against him here if it wasn't personal.
I think that's 100% true.
Anyway, let's talk about this confrontation between Francesco and Havoko, because later that evening in his quarters, Francesca actually reveals to Havoko, look, here's the Gom Jabbar needles. Listen and subscribe wherever you find your podcast.
It was crazy that she said that. It was so
weird.
Cool.
Very
so
weird
nice
that she said that, but I'm going to let it slide. Thank you.
I mean, they
writers,
named
for
the episode after us. It was very, very nice of them.
She reveals, I was sent here to murder you. Valia's plan was for me to stab you with this thing tonight, and not in the way that you like, babe. And Havoko doesn't believe her, again, because that seed from Valia has been planted, that Francesca has been playing him this whole time. None of this love has been real. And he, in a very dramatic choice, chooses to maybe make the only decision in his entire life that he's ever made of his own volition. He stabs himself.
Yeah.
Right in front of Francesca. From that moment, we then cut over to, because now that we're watching basically the prison break all take shape and happen. We're in the final act of this episode. So we quickly then cut over to the Suspensor prison where Valia arrives, followed closely by Theodosia, now disguised as Yanez. They free Yanez and explain how Theodosia will take her place, but Yanez says, no, I won't leave here without my guy, Kieran Atreides.
Yeah.
We both go where nobody goes. And
he's so well written. How could you leave without him?
He's so well written. And so they have to call an audible on the plan. They got to change things up on the fly. They're going to take Kieran with them. And Theodosia, instead of being Yanez, as we will see shortly, will instead pretend to be one of the injured guards on the ground to catch Desmond off guard. Well, let's close the loop on this escape sequence and this Havoko death sequence, because we then return back to Havoko's room where he is bleeding out on the ground. Francesca is distraught and crying over his body as he dies. And Natalia sneaks up on her and pricks her with her own Gom Jabbar in the neck. R.I.P. Francesca. She falls right across her lover's body. And Natalia runs out of the room screaming, the Emperor is dead, the Emperor is dead.
Yeah, with kind of the perfect little scene, right? Like, clearly, Havoko was stabbed in the stomach by this Bene Gesserit. And clearly, Natalia arrived just in time to kill the sister, but not in time to save her husband.
Yep.
Now she's the grieving widow who
Very
now has
easy
to,
for her to incriminate the sisterhood.
now I'm the Empress, and all that.
Yeah, totally. Right. Sets her up to be like a bad version of Cersei.
Yeah. She seemed genuinely shocked that the needle did such a good job of killing Francesca. And I'm like, what was she expecting? Did she know it had like metacyanide on it? Because she was like, prick. And then like, oh, she's dead.
Yeah, what if that had not worked?
Yeah, Francesca's like, ow, what the fuck? Oh my God, kill yourself. Like, why did you do that? Thank God that needle had a metacyanide on it. Yep. Otherwise, that would have been really awkward.
Right.
Yeah, didn't do a knife. Didn't do something else. Like, it feels appropriate, and it feels like very, again, Shakespearean, but definitely was a risk on Natalia's
yes,
point.
Right. Again, this is one of my larger criticisms of the show. It feels appropriate if you're writing the show for the audience, from the audience perspective, from Dune fans who know this. not for the character in that moment, in that world, consistent with their own worldviews and beliefs and actions and motivations.
Like, wouldn't she just stab her in the back with a sword?
Wouldn't
or
she
something?
just stab her? Wouldn't she call a guard? Wouldn't she anything except Gom Jabbar? But we got a Gom Jabbar because Dune fans are watching.
Yeah, or like knife across the throat or something.
Which is clunky.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we return to young Tula in a flashback where it is revealed, because I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, Valia knew about her child with Ori Atreides. That's wild. It is revealed that she worked with young Francesca to swap babies. She fully swapped babies. She gave Desmond away. She wanted to save Desmond from the generational trauma that caused the death of her love, Ori Atreides. She wanted to save Desmond from Valia's planning and scheming. She wanted to save Desmond from all of it.
That's right.
And so she gives Desmond to a mother who had a stillborn son, and the mother is a traveler who can take the baby far away. And Francesca says she has means so that he will live comfortably, although clearly that perhaps did not work out exactly as planned.
Right.
And a very interesting reveal, and one that I think that I like.
I enjoyed almost every time the show flashed back to the young Tula and young Valia.
True.
And I even wrote it down in my notes. I just was like, wish this had been the show. And I continued to think that even in this episode too. So I agree. I liked this flashback to young Tula and the heartbreak of giving up her child.
Yeah, and that whole sequence is so beautiful. I mean, even the way that she takes the stillborn baby and just looks at it with such tenderness and such sympathy for this mother who must have lost it. And then I'm also thinking, in addition to the trauma of giving away your child and how hard that is, the baby's crying and she's clearly struggling. All of this becomes motivating, like the core of Tula's character in the future. Is like, who is Tula? Tula's the one who did all of this for the sake of her son. And
Jen saying, what have you ever sacrificed? I've sacrificed more than you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in the present, adult Tula arrives at a locked down spaceport.
Oh, my God.
Locked down the spaceport, except for plot critical characters. Let them in.
Let those in. Let them in real quick.
Let them in. I mean, who's at the door? Tula? Oh, yeah, she's important for the scene. She has to get in.
Let her in. Right.
Yeah.
Who are you? Side character? Stop right there.
Stop right there. Not important.
This spaceport is locked down for all side characters and non-critical actors.
Duke Richese. Yeah, you're not in this episode. No, leave. Go tend to your burns, boy. And we do get a quick shot of Haro Harkonnen grabbing the recording device.
Hey, Leo!
I fucking called it.
You called it. Nice one.
Well, at the spaceport, still locked down, Valia and Desmond face off just as Tula arrives in time to help her sister overcome her visions and the virus. An incredible sequence, one that I loved and was just
really great.
Totally swept up in. I was so on board. It was
visually stunning.
Yeah, visually stunning.
There's a really cool moment where adult Valia and then this particles pass in front of her face and she becomes young
She's
Valia.
the child again.
And I was like, oh, cool.
And then she snaps back to unafraid Valia, who's there facing her fear, letting it pass through her, and she's back to her wizened older form. Yeah. So fucking rad. So much to say about that. And we see in this sequence, as she battles the virus, her fear goes all the way back to that moment when she saved Griffin Harkonnen, still very much tied to her brother and her brother's death being her fault. And he even confronts her about that in this fearful memory. And in order to survive, she has to overcome and accept the fear. She can't battle it with strength the way she's battled everything in her life forever. As Tula tells her, guides her through this, she has to overcome and accept the fear. She has to let it pass. I don't know. Around her doesn't feel right. Yeah. Maybe the fear has to pass.
Underneath is also kind of weird.
Underneath is strange. Are you jumping? I don't think so. No. So maybe it passes like over you, but also maybe like through you.
Oh.
Over and through.
I like through. Let's stick with through. Let's keep working on this. Let's keep workshopping this.
I don't know. I feel like this should have a snazzy title, but I don't know.
Nothing's coming to me at the moment.
The fortune cookie of fear. No. The parable of intimidation.
A little clunky, too many syllables. We'll keep workshopping. We'll
yeah.
announce something in the next couple episodes. Listener.
No, nothing. Anyway.
I don't know. You get the bit.
You get the bit. And one day we'll come up with something. Write us what you think it should be called, listeners. We'll come up with it. Well, anyway, so we also learn in this sequence, we see what the blue eyes are. And listener, it is the single glowing vision module of a thinking machine operation robot who we see it. Desmond's strapped down. It pulls out his eye, implants some things inside the visual thing, and then now his eye is the weapon that triggers the nanovirus, and that's it. That's what it is.
That this puts all those Leto 2 Paul Atreides theories to rest. It was just a thinking machine all along. Another reminder that we're still in Brian Herbert's universe. Yeah.
And mysterious silhouette there, but otherwise.
Sure, yeah. Right. Valia says, like the machine, obviously, and the eyes aren't the end all be all.
Yeah.
There is an actor, a shady actor, working behind the scenes using the machines against the Sisterhood.
I also do see this as the answer to how he survived the worm. Like
I think it's supposed to be. Yeah.
It's like this was on the surgery table where they brought him back to life and implanted shit in his body and everything. Yes. And then he is left to interpret, how did I come back to life? Well, that must have been God, those two blue eyes.
Right.
And he's
perhaps even implanted memories, if we're already poking and prodding around in there, might as well throw a couple of religious memories in there.
Yeah. And you know what? Also could have made him more resilient. I mean, we see all the scars on his back. Like maybe they gave him stronger things, and that's part of his character. We've talked about how fucking plot armored up he is. But in the Brian Herbert books, there are characters who have like flow metal body parts, and they have prosthetics, and there could be elements of this from this operating table that make him the hard to kill person that he is. Our producer, Luna, pointed out that Mark Strong and Desmond get stabbed in about the same place. Yeah. And Mark Strong is like killed in a matter of seconds. Or like, I don't know,
and Desmond
30 seconds.
Makes it to the spaceport.
And then still has this huge confrontation, but then is fine, but then is up. And he's just holding his
again and hugs
open
his
gut the whole time.
Just bleeding.
He's holding the contents of his stomach in. He's like, ugh, annoying, whatever, trained Bene Gesserit's sister stabbed him in the stomach and it didn't kill him.
Yeah. So, no, this is about as disappointing as the reveal of the blue eyes could have been, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I would have much rather left this up to mystery and interpretation.
I agree. I think that is the better
than to get this level of like reveal, this disappointing reveal.
I do think it would have been worse if it were the glowing two eyes of Erasmus or the glowing two eyes of the Simic body of Omnius or something like that. I think that would have been worse. This at least is like, okay, the thinking machine is the sort of misinterpretation, and it is operating on behalf of some human who's guiding the thing, and we're going to find out who that person is, or that,
Yeah.
But still, I think it would have been better to leave the eyes unanswered.
Open-ended. Yeah, agreed.
Anyway.
Okay, let's wrap up this episode summary then. At the end of all of this, Tula reveals the truth about Desmond's identity as her son to Valia. In a heartbreaking moment, she also pleads and convinces with Valia to spare him. Let me handle this.
Yeah.
And shockingly, Valia, to her credit, Valia does. And Valia leaves, walks away. Tula turns to her adult son, pulls him into a loving embrace.
Really sweet.
You can. It's very sweet. You can see it affect both of them deeply.
Yeah.
It was all over both of their faces for sure.
I wrote in my notes, is this the first hug Desmond's ever gotten?
Maybe?
Yeah. He smooched the Empress, never been hugged, though. And honestly, long hug does a lot for the soul.
It can do a lot, folks. If you haven't had a long hug in a while, find one.
I came home the other night. My fiance gave me a hug. We hugged for like 2 minutes straight, and I almost cried. It does wonders. It's great. Long hugs.
Being embraced by someone you love is just... it's magical. Best. Anyway, where were we?
Where were we? Where am I right now?
Desmond then immediately has his mom arrested. And that's where we end that.
That's what I did with my fiance too. I had her arrested right after that hug.
You got it.
You
Honestly, long hugs are illegal, folks.
Criminal.
Okay,
Criminal. Get the fuck out of here. What are you, hugging a long
Arrest
time?
him.
Arrest.
Whoever hugs you for that long.
Suspense or prison. Right away.
And in the final moments of this season, we cut to Valia, Kieran, and Yanez landing on a planet we all know very well.
Poritrin.
Sandy. They arrive on Arrakis, and Valia says oh my God, come on. Just a little pit stop. And Valia says that this is where the next part of their journey begins. And this is where they will unpack the mysteries of this nanovirus, of the thinking machines, and who's behind it all.
Yeah, the silhouette, all of that.
Okay, that wraps up our summary of episode 6 of Dune Prophecy. Let's take a quick breather. But when we come back, folks, we will dig a little deeper into the things that worked, into the things that didn't work for us, and talk about this season as a whole. So we'll be back in just a minute.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, let's peel back the veil. Let's go beyond the veil, behind the veil, whatever they say. Let's talk about what worked, what didn't work. And let's start with what worked. I'll kick us off.
Yeah.
I just want to say, first off, that I love everything about Tula Harkonnen. I think Olivia Williams, the older actress, and Emma Canning, the younger actress, they both did such a fucking good job with their scenes. A lot of really excellent nuance to Tula's motivations, both in the present and also in these flashback sequences. I think just excellent. Also, I think the writing. I think the writing around Tula's character is really good. A lot of subtlety, a lot of nuance, and a lot of it gives more. The more time you spend with it and the more time you look at her earliest scenes and her latest scenes and how they all kind of relate to each other. Very, very good overall.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned it earlier, I'll say it again, the visual representation of metabolizing the virus was so fucking smart.
So
dude.
Cool. So
I mean,
cool.
first of all, Dr. Nazir, I thought was great. I enjoyed her character quite a bit. Battling it out while the white and black specks are reflecting her success and failure was such a great way to show us that internal process. But then also it set up the snow metaphor when Valia is in her inner Lenka and the snow blowing past her are mixtures of the white and black particles. And we see literally thus the virus is represented this way for her in her internal world. It was so fucking good. So good. And more broadly, a huge shout out to the VFX team because from the agony sequence in, was that episode 2, episode 3?
Yeah.
To this internal Lenka sequence where she is herself begins to sort of dissolve into the wind as she lets the fear pass over and or through her in some sort of like fortune cookie of fear or whatever it's called. Really incredible. Really incredible stuff overall. Even the fold space effect in this episode where we see the highliner emerging from the darkness and all of the stars are kind of warping inward to this black. That was
cool stuff.
So incredible. I also like the change that Valia's inner circle witnessed her kill Dorothea. In the book, Valia kills Dorothea when they're alone in a room together. So it's really her building up her like tiny trusted circle alone. And I think having her inner circle witness that does a lot, not only for her, not exactly being alone, even if she has this kind of lone wolf mentality about getting what she wants above all others. I think it does a lot to provide motivation for the other characters to have their own doubts about her and their own agency despite their collaboration.
Yeah.
And whether that's Francesca actually loving Constantine, actually loving Haviko, and then going, I'm going to have my own agency within your plots, Valia, and I'm going to step away from them when they don't serve me anymore.
Right.
That is so much more understandable when she knows that Valia is doing the same thing with them, saying, I know I didn't consult any of you when I fucking killed Dorothea, and now you're in on the crime. Welcome to the conspiracy. So I thought that was excellent. And I thought that I think that broadly is a very strong change. And then finally, I want to say, there's probably a lot of things I'm missing because I really did love a lot of little moments in this episode and in this series broadly. But I just want to shout out again, Chloe Leah or Chloe Lay, as Lila.
Stunning.
Lila's actress did so much heavy lifting throughout this series.
Truly. She had to be like 4 different people over
She
the
had to
course
be
of
like
the season.
4 different people in one show and did a great job of it. So I really want to appreciate what Chloe was doing as the actress for Lila. I think Lila was a very fun character overall, and I loved seeing her as Raquella, her as Dorothea, how distinct they felt. I do have questions, lore-based questions about like, how is Dorothea in charge for so long? I feel like we need another sentence or two, but ultimately, hey, Chloe, great job. And
knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, Lila as a character I thought was quite fun. So that's a lot of what I liked. Again, there's probably a lot that I'm missing, but broadly, that's what I liked. What about you?
Well, I actually second your entire list there. I agree with all of the things you shouted out. I don't want to waste time repeating stuff. So I'm going to do something different. Our producer, Luna, had also written down her notes in our script here. And I want to shout out and share some of Luna's things, because I think Luna brought up some excellent points here as well. So, for example, Luna wrote that she really liked the Valia fight scene at the end, that confrontation between Valia and Desmond's guards, and her use of the voice. Lore issues aside, it was just cool to watch her go, "Defend me!" And then the guard turns around and immediately starts fighting for her. Like, hell yeah, that's dope. It was just fun to see how scary Valia can actually be when you actually have to get down to brass tacks and face off against her, and how devastating the voice in the context of how it's used in the show can be. So I definitely agree with Luna's take there. Luna also wanted to shout out Sister Jen. And I agree. I really enjoyed Sister Jen throughout this whole season. I think even all the way back in like episode 1, I was like, my girl, Sister Jen, shouts. Like, everybody needs a coworker like Jen. She continued to be that excellent coworker that everybody deserves to have. She's there when you need her. She supports you. She goes above and beyond. She's willing to keep your secrets. She's also willing to call out the bullshit when the bullshit's there. So I really enjoyed Sister Jen as well. And I'm glad that Luna shouted her out in her notes here. Okay, let's flip the coin then. What didn't work for you?
Okay, well, so much about Brian Herbert. I cannot, dear listener, I cannot stress enough how my least favorite things about this series and this episode in particular are 1-for-1 all over Brian's books.
Yeah. Brian's DNA is all over this show in many ways.
Especially this final episode, and in the worst ways. Like, okay, giving a list. Incomplete story arcs.
Oh my God.
They are all over Brian's books. And I've had people push back on that comment saying, well, they're a trilogy. You have to read the whole trilogy for blah, blah, blah. That's normal. But hey, you know what else is a trilogy? Dune, Messiah, and Children of Dune. And each of those are self-contained, enjoyable stories with beginnings, middles, and ends.
You can stop at any point in that trilogy and still walk away satisfied with a great story.
With a great story. Versus you have to read the next book to understand what's going to happen next, or to have any of your questions answered, is certainly not what I like. I don't want to say it's bad. It's just not what I prefer. I want to, like, let's say life gets in the way. I don't want to be like, well, fuck, I wasted all that time on 1,600 pages of fucking Sisterhood and Mentats, and I didn't read Navigator, so, oh, well, I guess I don't know what happens to any of those characters. That's dumb.
Ugh.
I don't like that. That's awful. Especially because the books are not
it's just sequel
enjoyable.
baiting, right? Like that. It's just like classic sequel baiting. You got to buy my next book.
Yeah. The next thing, gore and violence. And I say this because the Dune saga, of course, Dune, Messiah, Children, God, Emperor, isn't like lacking violence or killing, but the nature of the violence is always second to the motivations that drive the violence, right? Frank is pretty sparing in his descriptions of gore, you know, descriptions of how people are killed and where the knife kills them and blah, 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 because the gore isn't the point. Brian Herbert and Kevin Janderson do a lot of like gross torture shit. You know, people like breaking fingers and healing them and then breaking them again and ha 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 ha. And if you want a visual indication of this, look at this fucking eyeball scene where the eyeball gets pulled out. You get the things injected into the visual stem, and then and then the view from the eyeball of the face with the eyeball. It's like so unnecessary. It made me uncomfortable. And I get that some people like body horror and stuff, but that's why there are authors who that's their whole kind of gimmick and their shtick. The fact that this is then being introduced to the Dune universe continues to be upsetting. Also because there's like a disproportionate amount of like women being killed and murdered in Brian's books that, again, is cheap. It's shallow. It's
right.
Anyway.
I mean, Yanez becoming a damsel in distress in this episode when she had such potential at the start of this show.
Yeah. Now, Dune lore problems. There are so many I could bring up, so many I could list out. In this particular episode, I really think Other Memory continues to be a deep frustration for me because it continues to be like a catalyst and a way that people are deciding things, which is just makes it the issues with it front and center for anybody who knows what Other Memory is. Like, there are huge problems with what characters know what. And at a certain point, I just go, anybody who has Other Memory knows everything or knows exactly what they need to make whatever decision is going to be decided needs to happen without any,
Yep.
It's like Lila/Dorothea should not know where the bodies are, period. And if there's a reason that she does know, it has to give me it, because saying it's because of her Other Memory. Yeah, there's no stakes of a war of information if people just know things. Tula arrives. This is a little maybe harder to notice. Tula arrives at the lockdown spaceport, and her Other Memory voices go, "Your sister is near. Go to her."
How?
What?
How?
What is Other Memory? What is Other Memory at this point? Like, it's a chat room. It's a Discord server that you join when you awaken. Like, what is this? And I don't want to dwell on this, but the fact that this ends up being plot critical many times in Brian's books continues to be so frustrating, because again, it's like people are revealed secrets that they shouldn't know because of X, Y, and Z, and that motivates them to do X, Y, and Z. Other Memory is very important in the Dune universe, but it is never as mission critical or as the point as it is in Brian's books. And in this show, this 6th episode did a lot of that, which really frustrates me. And then finally, things that Brian's books are really frustrating about are just technological things. Like the little camera that Hara Harkonnen uses is clearly like a thinking machine, or is a thinking machine. It self-assembles, it deassembles, it records video and audio, but seems to track people. It is so clearly a thinking machine. Yeah. But then why?
Certainly smarter than a leopard gecko transformer, which is just a toy.
So why does Desmond use it? Why is he okay with that piece of technology? And if it's not a thinking machine, fucking what is it? I was thinking, it's like a memory crystal that just like maybe captures vibrations, and it's, and then you replay the vibrations and that sound, and cool. But no, it's just like a dissembling robot. And this broader complaint is that like Brian's books are full of these technological pieces where a character will say, in my records, I found an image of this person. And you go, what records? How did you search records for a photo taken by someone on a different planet without a computer? And that's the only reason a character will know what another character looks like, is because they like looked it up in a system that doesn't have any type of computer. It happens frequently. And it is the sort of thing that you kind of just become numb to after a book. It's just these are plot critical elements that are clearly not being considered, are clearly not carefully built into the universe. They just appear when they need to. They do what they need to do, and everything moves forward. And that little recordy thing is exactly that, and is, again, just feels like Brian stuff through and through. So,
yes.
Anyway, TED Talk aside, I know that I'm supposed to talk about things I don't like, but I do want to end my list of things that I don't like by saying I think this show was like 1 or 2 degrees off of being really good. I think there were some really great ideas. If I wasn't as bothered by lore stuff as I was, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more. I know we've heard that in our community too. Like Dune fans are going to be more critical of this than the average viewer because we're out here critiquing things like Other Memory when other viewers can just let it be a thing that they don't fully understand, but that's okay. So at the end of the day, I think the show was not far off from being a great thing, but for sure, this final episode didn't land the ship the way I wanted it to.
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
Well, I am once again going to share some of Luna's notes because I will be getting into my overall issues with the series a little bit later in our takeaways. So I'll dig a little bit deeper there. But I will say, in short, I think we've kind of been falling on two sides of the aisle in our entire coverage of this show. And now that we've watched the whole first season, like I can pretty confidently say that I didn't like this show. And I actually think it was 1 or 2 degrees from even being good, let alone great. You know, I think it landed in the bad camp for me. And I'll get into that a little bit later in my takeaways. But Luna noted the face dancer thing and the Havako stabbing himself thing that we already touched on earlier. She also texted me this hilarious SNL sketch that I'd never seen called Dear Sister.
You hadn't seen that? That's so funny.
And she was basically like, this episode 6, was just the Dear Sister sketch happening. And I was like, I don't know what that means, Luna. And so she sent me the link and I watched it and I was like, Luna, you're fucking spot on.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's happening.
Just death after death after death, yeah.
And not even death, but just like plot after plot after plot because we just need it to happen. We need to get somewhere with this. We need to force a conclusion to happen. And like the sketch, I recommend people go watch that sketch because it'll make sense what Luna was getting at here. This episode completely felt like that sketch where we just like worked backwards, did completely illogical, irrational things. The characters made choices that made utterly no sense, many of which we've talked about in our summary, just so we could get to the end point of a script that we had written, regardless of whether it was satisfying or logical or conclusive in any way, which I don't think it was. And so I agree with Luna's hilarious take there, that this episode in particular felt like watching an SNL sketch.
Yeah.
And I walked away from the show pretty disappointed. But I guess that kind of segues us nicely into talking about the show, zooming out in general, zooming out away from episode 6 and maybe talking about this entire first season of Dune television.
Yeah.
And perhaps getting into our deeper takeaways on it and our concluding thoughts about Dune Prophecy Season 1.
Yeah. And I definitely had my laundry list of Brian Herbert complaints that went on for a while. So why don't you kick us off?
Okay. Yeah.
Talk to me about, overall season takeaway. What kind of points are you bringing away from this?
So zooming out, like I stated a minute ago, I got to ultimately, unfortunately, conclude that this was a largely forgettable season of Dune television for me personally. Mm-hmm. It kind of veered anywhere from middling to outright bad for me. And I had stated this on one of our live stream Q&As a few weeks back, but if this wasn't Dune, this is not a show I would have wasted my time with. I certainly would not have made it past episode 2. It's really the Dune world building, the visuals, the lore stuff, and frankly, like our conversations together, our live streams with our Discord fans, and the interactions online with the community that kept me coming back. That's where most, like 90% of my enjoyment with this show lived. Watching the show itself was a chore for me, unfortunately. And it getting to talk about it, theorize about it, that's where the fun of it was for me. So what do I mean by that? Like, I do think this show committed 2 major sins this season that if they had been different, if different creative choices had been made, I think would have made for a better and more compelling season of Dune television. So getting into those, sin number 1, I think this show lost sight of themes in favor of lore. As you talked about with the issues in Brian's books, much like Brian's books, I think this show doesn't have the conviction to say a whole lot of anything, and therefore kind of ends up being about nothing. Like it's empty calories that fail to nourish the mind and the soul, like a Frank Herbert story does. Frank's books, in fact, stand the test of time because they have things to say. Frank had strong convictions and beliefs and things to say, and he said them via his characters and plots and world building.
Yeah, like spicy takes.
These are exactly like these are things that we've talked about endlessly on this podcast. These themes around ecology, religion, politics, charismatic leaders, stagnation, the trap of foresight, all of these ideas are baked into the story and world of Frank Herbert's books. None of these themes that, in my opinion, make Dune Dune
Yeah.
are present in this show in any meaningful way. There are some sort of half-hearted and shallow nods towards some of these ideas, maybe,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
they aren't meaningfully explored or present in this show in any way. I will say, I think the one theme that is somewhat consistent across this season is the theme of fear. But as we sort of discussed earlier, even fear ends up being just this like MacGuffin plot device that explains a virus, that explains the origin of a lore litany. Oh, I'm sorry, fortune cookie that we see later
That's a good
in
word.
Frank books.
Fortune
you
cookie?
know?
Yeah, fortune cookie. Great.
So it rather than being a theme that is explored and underpins and binds this series together, it primarily serves the lore instead.
Yeah, I was going to say, because even like there's no slam dunk on any of those themes. Like even if I talk
Yes.
about women trying to carve out their agency within a male's political universe, or you talk about what is truth and lie and how do you trust and what does truth mean, that none of many of them are there, but they're not like, they don't end up being the reason for anything. They're
Yes.
just kind of there,
Wonderfully
present.
Put. Yep.
And it's like, okay, I'm glad they're there. I am. But I feel like in the same way that Michaela's response to Desmond had an opportunity for a really poignant point about colonizers and oppressors and your people as Fremen and how do they relate to a sisterhood, the organization of the
Great
sisterhood.
example.
What a great opportunity that we didn't capitalize on, that we didn't utilize.
We
and
didn't hit that
kind of-
slam dunk.
Right. And that would be a point where I'm fairly confident Frank Herbert would have delivered a 2-page slam dunk.
Oh,
Leto
two?
going,
Just two?
I had another thought about that. Moneo, come here.
Yeah, exactly. Wonderfully put, Leo. I couldn't agree more. I think the show ended up being, again, much like the Brian books. These are many criticisms that we've levied against Brian books too. The show ended up being too preoccupied with the lore of it all, wanting to show us the origins of things like the Litany or a proto-Kwisatz Haderach, or maybe the Sardaukar, seeing a Gom Jabbar on screen, seeing the voice in action. Look, it's an Ixian. Look, it's a Mentat. Look, it's a Tleilaxu. A lot of that was happening in the show, rather than, say, exploring in any meaningful way the relationship between humanity and advanced technology.
Right.
It's
AI.
there.
What
to
a
your
great
point,
opportunity.
It's there.
Yeah.
Lots of opportunities to explore that here. We never actually slam dunk. We never get that ball in the net. Or the example you gave earlier was wonderful. How do women arrest agency in a deeply patriarchal and feudalistic society that arises after a horrifying war against machines? Natalia would have been the vessel for us to explore something like that. And yet we don't. Maybe we make some sort of like nod toward it, but it doesn't go anywhere. And it certainly isn't the motivation for any of the characters to do anything. So that was a big issue for me. I think one of the biggest sins this show committed. And I can give a counterexample of a show that absolutely fucking crushed this. I recently watched the excellent Mr. and Mrs. Smith on Amazon. It's a show starring Maya Erskine and Donald Glover. It came out at the start of 2024. That show, the plot, whatever, it's about a married couple who are super spies and live together and do missions together. None of that really fucking matters, because what the show is about is love and the messiness of romantic relationships and exploring all the highs and lows of what the reality is when you commit your life to someone. Every episode, all 8 of those episodes in that season are underpinned with this through line, and the season as a whole is bound together by that idea, by that strong central theme. Dune Prophecy, in my opinion, utterly lacks that and suffers greatly for it. So that's sin number one. Sin number two that I wanted to touch on is this show, and we've said this in previous episodes, this season was too reliant on future seasons for its storytelling. I won't harp on this too much because I've kind of been ringing this alarm bell since episode 2. I brought this up, like where the show is trying to do too much in too little time and is not moving at the correct pace, and it doesn't seem to acknowledge the fact that it's only 6 episodes. The question I'm left with at the end of this first season is: was this a political show about Carino Palace intrigue? Was this a dark and heartbreaking journey of 2 young girls who are battling their family trauma and finding a new purpose in life? Was this a show about a mysterious man with unprecedented abilities showing up and completely destabilizing a young, budding imperium? Wait, maybe this show was actually about an utterly mismanaged and misguided rebellion facing the harsh realities of creating real systemic change, which doesn't come easy.
Right.
And the answer kind of is like, this show is literally all of those and none of those all at once. Like, it attempts to juggle so many different stories and characters and plot lines that all of the stories and characters and plot lines suffer because of that.
Mm.
And by the end of these 6 episodes, we're left with, I don't know, a dozen loose plot threads, and we've had all of these like meaningless scenes that set up future stuff that might happen. Harrow with a fucking recorder thrown into this last episode that don't go anywhere. And that's not satisfying. What did I watch 6 episodes for if we're just setting things up for the future for a lot of it? It's deeply unsatisfying to watch. And again, the example I can give is Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Folks, go watch this incredible show. Straddles this line perfectly. It creates this amazing arc, 8-episode arc in its first season, with a beginning, middle, end, highs, lows, climax, drama. All of that takes place in 8 episodes. And yet, you walk away from that first season of Mr. and Mrs. Smith with plenty of little mysteries that you're just dying to know about in the future. Mysteries that were not plot critical to what took place in this first season, but mysteries that will certainly be exciting to unpack in the future.
Yeah.
That is what this show needed to do, and in fact, it almost did the exact opposite of that. Forgot to tell a tight, satisfying narrative with a beginning, middle, end in one season, and instead entirely only set up future stuff to happen. And ultimately, that for me is deeply unsatisfying to watch.
Yeah, sure.
All of that being said, I know I've been talking for a while, so I will wrap up. All of that being said, I too want to end a long list of criticisms on a positive note. I truly, unironically, and passionately hope that this show gets renewed.
Yeah.
Because even bad shows deserve a second chance. Even bad shows deserve to find their footing. It is rare that you hit a home run on the first season of your show.
Especially among a production timeline that was like, as you've said before, a death sentence for most shows. Show happened, maybe suffered because of it. Definitely suffered because of it.
Definitely suffered because of it. And look, I have a long list of criticisms that I, for the last 6 weeks now, in many episodes of this podcast, I've been listing. But the show is not irredeemable, despite all of the things I've talked about. There are glimmers of greatness shining between the cracks of all of the other issues all throughout this season. Episode 3, for me personally, was a huge standout and showed the true potential of this show. I want those little pieces of greatness to have a chance to flourish, to get the opportunity to break through and take center stage. A lot of very passionate and talented and hardworking people worked to make this show. And the truth is, the reality is, nobody sets out on a project like this to make a bad TV show. And as you stated, there were production issues. It's actually kind of a small miracle this show ever even came out, that this show even exists at all, because the production issues that Dune Prophecy had for many years are practically a death knell for most productions. So it's a miracle it came out, and all I will say is I hope there are more miracles in store for this show, for this team, for this production. And I would love for them to get the chance to take another crack at this in season 2.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's my takeaway. Those are my big picture thoughts on season 1 of Dune Prophecy. I'm curious where things have landed for you and how you're feeling walking away from it.
Well, so I think first, I enjoyed the series. I really resonate with a lot of what you're saying, especially when it comes to missed opportunities. I think that broadly, although I very much enjoyed certain elements of it, when we start having conversations about like, how could that conversation have gone? Or how could this character have been utilized? Or what modern issues like artificial intelligence or like GPT or like whatever, how could those have been examined through a fun, critical lens that asks hard questions and doesn't necessarily provide easy answers? I am more disappointed than I would be otherwise. And
yeah,
that's a tough feeling. Now, I am still very glad that we got this series. And there was a very real possibility of us not getting the series at all, considering especially the production timeline. And so in the grand scheme of things, I'm really glad we got it. I just hope that how it turned out isn't the reason it doesn't get greenlit, because I think if it gets greenlit and there's some real enthusiasm behind a season 2, it could be excellent. I did want to take a step back and look at, like, we had Matt C. in Discord was like, he said, quote, "I already forgot the original plot was to get a sister on the throne." End quote. Which, yeah, that's fair. You'd be forgiven for forgetting that. That is the mission statement. And I think that with some of the context that we finally have after this final episode, I wanted to take a step back and kind of state in my own words what I think this show was about. Like what I think the kind of heartbeat of the show was.
Yeah.
So my thesis for what Dune Prophecy is about is that for the last 30 years, the Sisterhood has been led by a vengeful, single-minded, and ruthless Valia Harkonnen who is driven by hatred, anger, and a belief that generally might makes right. And that's it. She has the fear of Arafel. She has the desire for an empress that is within the under the wing of the Bene Gesserit. But those things are secondary to the fact that she is doing what she can to progress her own interests and to progress what she thinks is right. And Valia's approach to leadership, I think, mirrors her approach to problem solving. Like we see in episode 6, this conversation she's having with her collaborators in Anarol going, how do we get control? How do we face the reckoning? We do it through this, what was it? Age of Empires 3? Kings of...
Crusader Kings 3.
Crusader Kings 3. She's like, this Crusader Kings 3 campaign is how we get end control. And it is all about that sort of like straightforward approach to strength. And...
Wait, holy shit. Breaking news.
Oh?
Hollywood Reporter, Dune Prophecy renewed for season 2 at HBO.
Oh, shit. Are you serious?
Literally, as we are recording, I just scrolled on my phone and saw that.
Well, folks, now you know Abu doesn't listen to me when I'm talking.
Yeah, I was doom scrolling on my phone a little bit.
Dune.
Oh my
holy shit!
God.
Deadline too.
Showrunner Alison Shapker announces the pickup a few days ahead of the first season finale.
Let's
go!
Yeah! Woo! Shit!
Woo!
God damn, that puts a very interesting energy to this conversation we're having.
Wow.
All right, so let's start again at the top of the episode, huh?
Genuinely so happy to hear that. Incredible. Yeah, we got to re-record this whole episode.
All right. No, just kidding.
Wow. That's great news. Genuinely great news, Honestly, this doesn't change this episode discussion today for me at all, really. My criticism still stands about season 1, but I am so happy. So genuinely happy.
Yeah.
That the show will get another chance to swing for the fences. Let's fucking go. I'm ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if Alison Shapker is still attached to it. Like, show us what you can do when you've got like everything together, right? Like no one wants a complicated production timeline. As you were saying, like no one aims to make a bad show. And I think at the end of the day, the fact that it's been greenlit this early and that they've already assembled the cast and they already have all these questions answered, it's like, yes, good. Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
The only thing I would say that changes here is that our verbiage would be, okay, now we know this is happening. And I guess some piece of this will still be in the episode. So
yeah. I'm going to leave most of that in.
Yeah. Oh, gold. Podcast gold. Excellent.
Podcast gold. Like, folks, we captured that raw in the moment.
That's
that was
so
totally,
sick.
literally me just ignoring Leo and scrolling on my phone. Let that be a lesson that...
Okay, I'll try to make better points. Jesus, fuck. Scytale is the best character in Dune. You intrigued?
Oh, let me put my phone down. Oh gosh, amazing. Okay, well, I still think your takeaway stands as well. About episode 6. So,
yeah. Well, back to my thoughts about this first of 2 seasons. Oh, that's gonna make my second takeaway really funny. Okay, well, Valia's approach to leadership, I think, mirrors her approach to problem solving. It's this like strong, focused, straightforward approach to fixing things. And for instance, she describes Havoko, a man, quote, more prone to stability than strength, end quote, as literally being weak and unfit for rule. Now, is she saying that just to upset him and to be thrown in prison? Maybe. But ultimately, I think it's telling that she thinks that someone who is stable and reliable is weak and ultimately unfit for rule. That's how she views leadership. Now, she uses the mantra, sisterhood above all, regularly, but also regularly makes decisions, both in the book and in this series, driven by her desire for revenge against House Atreides and for the rise of House Harkonnen, basically. I also think that her final kind of agony, quote unquote, against the RNA retrovirus in this episode shows us at her core, Valia is still very much that young woman. She's kind of frozen in her views of the world on Lankavale right after, saving Griffin, but still very much afraid of being wrong. She still like ties her identity very much to Griffin Harkonnen and that moment. And I still think of her as that like kind of frozen in development young woman. She's not, she hasn't gotten wise in her older years. It's like a lot of the same mentalities there.
Totally.
And we even see a glimpse of that when Evgeny Harkonnen calls her out on some of it. We see how much it shakes her when he goes, "You're the one that killed Griffin." And we see her, "I will not apologize for my strength," she says, too defensively. All right, Valia. Yeah. All right. Covering it up.
Sounds like someone who maybe hasn't come to peace with their baggage.
Yeah, it sounds like someone who should probably apologize for their strength also. Especially because your strength keeps getting people killed. Now, in this episode, we see Francesca basically secure the purported goal of the sisterhood. And I recognize there is definitely some ambiguity here because we don't get Havoko explicitly saying, "I'm going to make you the empress." But when she approaches Valia, she's like, "My imprint holds. We've got it. How about I do this? Or how about I leverage my control over him to let go, release Yanez?" And when she tells Valia that, Valia's like, "No, I'm not having it," because ultimately I think that's not actually Valia's goal. This is also when she suggests changing tactics, again, just redefining the goalposts so that she can kind of continue to lead the party. And on one level, like maybe she doesn't have any faith that he will ultimately reject Desmond Hart. But then later, when he literally asks her for her support, like, "Hey, buy in with me. Come back. I'm so sorry. Help me defeat Desmond Hart." Even then, she really takes the time to like dig into him. And instead of just being like, "No, we can't do that. And ultimately, I came here today to kill you." And then he could have arrested her. Again, it all just feels very personal and very petty.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think that is what I would say the show is about Valia being driven more than she expects by fear, by the fear of being that person who got Griffin killed for no reason. I think she is trying to prove herself to everyone around her, but mostly herself. And she's also not buying her own bullshit. And I think that's the story that we got. And I think that's like broadly a pretty compelling story. I do feel like when she tells Tula, "I'm no longer afraid," that is the moment that many of us were hoping for, to have this like Valia's arrived and now she's in a new stage of her life. And that's what this season brought us. That being said, we were promised a lot more, or at least like we were hinted at getting a lot more from the universe, from these other characters. Again, characters like Inez, who could have had this great long runway and great character development, or characters like Constantine, who took up maybe too much space in the earlier episodes, but as we were talking about with Nerd Cookies in our live stream on Thursday, like Constantine and his scenes with Francesca were really heartfelt. And like,
yes,
absolutely. We're great, but we're getting them after multiple episodes of him being kind of a lame duck character who's just one note. Really good to look at. Just so good to look at.
A sexy duck.
A sexy lame duck. Just the lamest, sexiest duck. I mean, quack, quack, Constantine. I've got some breadcrumbs for you.
I'll spread my feathers for you, or whatever ducks
Whatever
do.
ducks do, yeah. So that's my first takeaway, is I think the show broadly is about Valia and that kind of journey that she goes on with incidental moments from Tula and some of her supporting cast.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
My second takeaway is titled, Holy Hell, Please Be Greenlit for a Season 2. Which
I manifested
Which I manifested because midway through take 1, I discover greenlit for a Season 2. Good Lord. And hey, listeners, we recorded this like 6 days ago. So this is breaking news for us, which is very exciting. So I'll say, wow, I'm so glad I get to say this. Now that we know there's a Season 2, let's take a look at the characters and plot elements. Look how easy this flows. Let's take a look. Now that we know there's a Season 2, listeners.
You wrote a really flexible script here, you know?
Listen.
Column A, column B, you pick
however
your poison.
It turns out, it
works for either.
Yeah. This finale leaves a number of characters floating. So in Season 2, let's talk about who gets developed, who gets resolved, what happens. Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm going to group this by the planets that we have looked at. And let's look at kind of the state of things and how they can launch us into a second season. So, Wallach 9. Dorothea seems to be fully back via Lila. Unsure if she's going to relinquish control again. Maybe that could be a fun plot thing where occasionally she's Raquella, knowing that she's been controlled by Dorothea and then working against everything else. Like, that could be cool. She's destroyed the thinking machine records at the heart of the Sisterhood. She's obviously super anti-Valia, and while Jen seems loyal to Tula, the Harkonnen sisters probably aren't going to be welcome back on Wallach 9 anytime soon, which is good, because one's in prison and one's on Arrakis. Next up, we have Seleucus Secundus. On Seleucus Secundus, we've got Tula and Theodosia, who are both in suspensor cells, probably, because that's the only type of prison we've been shown so far.
Right.
The Emperor is dead. He's been tragically murdered, folks. I don't know if you heard. A Sisterhood member stabbed him before.
That's what I heard.
Empress Natalia bravely rushed in and killed her with a needle that she boldly assumed had poison on it. Now, you might be wondering, if Natalia is the acting empress, what's going on with Yanez? Well, unsure.
How do you spin that story?
How do you spin that? I see two probable ways it gets spun. Either Natalia puts absolutely everything on the Sisterhood and says, hey, I know Yanez has been seen off-world with, Reverend Mother Valia Harkonnen. She's been taken hostage and she's been tricked, blah, blah, blah. Her mind has been corrupted and we need to save her. Or, depending on how far the Natalia and Yanez rift has drifted, maybe Natalia says, honestly, it pains me to say this, but Yanez is now an enemy of the state. She's defected. Something like that. She too long was under the tutelage of the Bene Gesserit and participated, in fact, in the
that would be interesting.
Murder of her own father. And that's why we need to bring her in or whatever.
Juicy.
So there's a lot of ways that could be handled. Now, of course, at Natalia's right-hand spot, we have Desmond Plot Armor Hart. He's a recent guest on Intergalactic Maury and recently has reconnected with his biological mother, but is not very happy about it. Again, he has also learned, let's not forget, he has learned from Valia and Tula that his power is not a God-given gift, that it was given to him by someone using a thinking machine, and that it uses thinking machines. Does this mean Desmond will no longer use his power? Does this mean as a man with strong convictions, he will abandon those things? Or like Manfred Toronto, is he just going to move the goalpost and be still the kind of asshole that he is?
Right.
We'll see. Although I'm pretty confident that with Travis Fimmel as the character, I'm going to enjoy whatever he does. Very fun. Also on Salusa Secundus, worth mentioning, Haro Harkonnen now has incriminating footage of his Aunt Valia. So we will see what happens
how that plays out
with that. Yeah. And then finally, we have Arrakis, a planet we had not yet seen, but now we get to see it. Valia, Yanez, and Kieran have just landed, and they are going to be hunting down the source of Desmond's thinking machine powers and that mysterious silhouette who overlooked the operation that presumably saved his life and gave him these powers. Constantine is also kicking around somewhere. If my understanding of the timeline's right, he's on Arrakis or near it with...
I think they'll link up with him.
With the Emperor's fleet. That's what I'm thinking. Because also our guy, although he betrayed Kieran, the last thing he was told by his now late mother was, your goal in life is to protect Yanez. And we know that that's something that he already felt very strongly about. So I'm pretty confident he's going to come around. He'll be Yanez's ally. And he's got this big chunk of the Emperor's forces. Maybe he and Yanez vie for the throne, even though they're not on Salusa Secundus. So a few ways that could play out. But looking back for a second on the questions that we wanted answered in episode 5 of our coverage, this series did manage to give us some of what we wanted. We got a resolution to what the eyes were. We have answers about Desmond, some of them. We have a more or less complete emotional journey for Valia from this person who had fear kind of lurking in the back of her mind about, did I cause Griffin's death? All of this different stuff. And now she has this new coping mechanism that in theory will make her immune to Desmond in the future, which also makes her unbeatable. So there is this, we have some of the things we wanted, but definitely like the can has been kicked down the road regarding some of the bigger questions we had. And I would say, especially, and this is unfortunate, but especially with the reveal that Desmond's like repair surgery was a thinking machine at the hands of some other thing. I feel like this is leaning very heavily toward like Omnius or Erasmus as like the future big bad, which is super unfortunate because they're really dumb characters. I think broadly, whatever it turns out to be, I'm right there with you, Abu, that like I want more Dune, and I'm so glad that the season got greenlit when it did, because I also don't know what the reaction to this finale is going to be. And ultimately, even if people are disappointed with it, I think we can all unanimously say, well, okay, that might not have been what all of us wanted, but let's be excited that there is an opportunity to tell more stories within the Dune universe in season 2.
I was going to say, like, quite strategic to announce a season 2 before the finale, perhaps, because...
maybe, yeah.
Like, it does sort of cushion the fall of some of the disappointment, right? Like a lot of people might go into this season finale and go, damn, I'm disappointed. I'm certainly one of those people, right? Like I walked away being like, not what I wanted, but now you get the silver lining of, but maybe I'll get more of what I wanted in season 2, or like maybe there will be resolution to the like dozen or so loose threads we've scattered across the playing field and left dangling. Now, instead of being just utterly disappointed a dozen times over, I can go, okay, I'm excited to see how they pick up some of these threads in season 2.
Totally.
It does cushion the fall a bit.
Well, and I was going to say...
Smart on them.
Very smart on them. And I was going to say that would probably be one of the differences. If we re-recorded this episode, some of... what I understood was some of your frustrations were how many things they were banking on for a season 2.
Yeah.
And now they know there's a season 2. So it's like, for sure, the scenes that they spent setting up things that we don't get resolutions for, cool. We will now maybe get resolutions for them. And if the results, or if the kind of reception to this episode, this season, this finale, is less than desired, maybe season 2, they'll be a little bit more careful with what they leave floating and what they resolve. You know, like you never want to, again, if you can make a season 2 that's great and stands alone and is excellent, do that. But maybe they also will know, hey, we might not be renewed for like 7 more seasons based on the reception so far. Let's make sure this one's good and make sure that this one resolves things.
You're always like recalibrating that dial.
Yeah.
Like any sort of creative work that goes into a public space and gets immediate feedback, because we live in 2024 and the internet is a thing.
Twitter and X.
Like you're always recalibrating that dial and figuring out the like push and pull of a creative venture and how it's received and how the business aspect will play. So I think you're spot on. I think the approach to season 2, my gut instinct will be quite different.
Yeah.
And hopefully smoother, given that like now that they know it's happening.
No kidding.
And we have a showrunner who hopefully stays on, and we have a cast that is locked into this production, presumably, assuming no extenuating circumstances. Like, things are quite locked in now.
Yeah,
and now
totally.
you get to like, the foundation is built. Now you build.
Yeah,
now you build on top of that.
totally.
You build the house. And so that does open the doors for large improvements to some of the low points of this first season.
Yeah. Well, that's our episode with like bombshell breaking news of the last quarter.
Like midway through.
That's incredible.
Wow. What a podcast moment.
Very proud. Very happy.
That's fun. Yeah. Very happy about that news.
Well, before we let you go, dear listener, we want to remind you of some ways to support the show and to keep in touch with us. And the 2 best ways to support us are, 1, to become a patron over at patreon.com/Gamjabar, or check out our Dune-themed swag from our merch store. It's a little late for holiday shopping, but hey, there's always next year.
That's right.
Ultimately, those links are in the show notes. So if either of those sound interesting to you, check them out.
Check them out. And of course, we love to hear from you. One of the best parts of this experience, as I said earlier, has been chatting with other Dune fans online, in our Discord, with our patrons, with you, Leo, one-on-one.
Yeah.
That has been the part of this experience I've enjoyed the most, and I would love to keep that going. So email us, gamjabarpodcast@gmail.com. Send us your thoughts, send us your theories, send us what you hope to see from season 2 now that it's been greenlit. Let us know how we can cover season 2, which we absolutely will. Even better than we covered season 1. Give us all that feedback. We love all of that. gamjabarpodcast@gmail.com is the place to keep the conversation going with us. We'd love to hear it.
Indeed.
Well, friends, there is no real ending. It's just the place where you stop the recording, but this podcast is always one step beyond logic, so help spread the word of Muad'Dib and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lord Party Podcast Network on lordparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. You can also watch video versions of select episodes on the Lord Party YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, whoever controls the podcast controls the universe.